Welcome back, Trailblazers. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to talk about a tool that has completely transformed the way I plan and navigate my hikes, AllTrails Plus. As a Trailheads ambassador and the organizer of the Yakima Valley Trekkers, I'm out on the trails a lot. One of my favorite features of AllTrails Plus is the ability to edit and create my own maps. Conditions change, fallen trees, washed out sections, or even a last-minute reroute. And with AllTrails Plus, I can adjust my route on the fly and share it with others so everyone stays informed and safe. AllTrails Plus also gives you offline maps, wrong turn alerts, and 3D trail previews to help you stay on track and make the most of your adventure. And the best part, you can get 30% off an AllTrails Plus membership with my exclusive link in the episode show notes. So whether you're planning your next big trek or just looking for a new trail to explore, AllTrails Plus has you covered. Check it out and let's hit the trail. Welcome to the Season 13 of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and each week we're hitting the trail through conversations with extraordinary hikers from across the United States and beyond. Winter brings its own kind of magic to the outdoors. Quiet forests dusted in snow, frosty ridgelines glowing in soft morning light, and trails that ask us to slow down, bundle up, and move with intention. This season, I've had the privilege of sitting down with hikers whose stories reflect the same sense of resilience and wonder. From snow-covered summit pushes and cold weather camping lessons to mindful miles on peaceful winter trails, their voices remind us that adventure doesn't hibernate, it simply changes shape. So zip up your puffy, pour something warm into your mug, and get ready. Season 13 is here, and the conversations ahead are as bold, reflective, and inspiring as the winter landscape we love. In this special Season 13 bonus episode, returning guest Steven takes us inside his relentless, months-long push to prepare for Denali, the highest peak in North America. By launching a full-scale mountaineering campaign across the United States West Coast, from expedition-style living on Mount Shasta, steep technical routes on Mount Hood, and a humbling, windswept retreat on Mount Whitney, to a confidence-building summit on Mount Rainier, and a powerful solo push on Mount Adams, Steven shares how each mountain became a training ground for systems, pacing, cold weather efficiency, and mental resilience. He reflects on the harsh realities of what climbers call blue-collar mountaineering on Denali. Heavy sled pulls, back-to-back cachet carries, fixed-line ascents, brutal weather windows, and the quiet psychological battles that unfold high on the mountain. Through it all, Steven opens up about how the experience reshaped his understanding of grit, humility, success, and why the journey often matters more than the summit itself. We also dive into his training philosophy, non-negotiable gear planning, and the discipline of the 1,000 feet per hour rule, along with the lessons he continues to carry from iconic climbs like Rainier, Hood, Adams, Shasta, Whitney, and Kilimanjaro, as he moves forward on his pursuit of the 7 summits. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Steven. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. We have a really special guest with us today. He's coming back on to share about his experience tackling some amazing mountains along the West Coast on his journey to summit Denali. Steven, for new listeners who are checking in during the holiday season, can you give us a quick snapshot of who you are and what fuels your drive for big mountains and long miles?
Sure, absolutely. First, thanks for having me on again. Really appreciate the opportunity. So I retired from the military in 22 and did a through hike at the Appalachian Trail. And while on that, I fell in love with backcountry adventuring, just the physical challenge of it, the mental challenge of it, and being out in nature. I found that it just switches my brain off and it allows me to focus on the moment and not distracted by other things that happen outside of the backcountry. So fell in love with it, started doing bigger mountains, 14ers in Colorado, some other ones down in Ecuador, and then working up to, the 7 summits and some other ones like that. So that's kind of my gist or my story, if you will, and appreciate you having me on again. Thanks.
Yeah, Steven, and you were able to check off this last summer another one of those summits in this incredible journey that you did. You launched a full-scale mountaineering campaign along the West Coast that included Shasta, Hood, Mount Adams right in my neck of the woods, Whitney, Rainier, and ultimately Denali. Can you share with us what sparked that West Coast push?
I started a through hike of the Arizona Trail to get into mountaineering shape for Denali. So I upped my base weight. I carried a rope. I carried my harness, stuff that I would never use on the trail. But at night in my tent, I would tie knots and practice some things like that and, mess around with my harness and whatnot. So up my base weight for that. Got about all the way to the south rim and then had to jump off because my pad busted. So it was about end of April at that point. My flight up to Alaska was at the end of May. So I figured I needed to switch to Denali specific stuff. When I got back to Colorado, ordered all my gear, got everything. There just wasn't enough snow out here at that point to really work on sled pulls, dial in my gear, just be in an expedition style environment for an extended amount of time. So looked at the Pacific Northwest, obviously, with all the mountains that you mentioned, and packed up my car and drove out and ended up at Bunny Flat Campground in Shasta. That was basically my first spot. Tried to get a permit for Rainier, was lucky enough to get one for the date that I wanted. Same thing for Whitney as well. And then, of course, Adams, you don't need one. But for Shasta, I lived on it for a week up at, is it Horse Campground? I think is what it's called. Yeah, I went in from Bunny Flats, carried my sled in, and everyone was staring at me like I was a creature from another planet because most everyone there was doing ski ascents and descents. But got to the campground, set up, and then, just started living expedition style on Shasta. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, and what did that week living on the mountain teach you about, your systems, pacing, and even cold weather efficiency?
Yeah, I definitely learned a lot about the equipment that I had just purchased because I didn't use a lot of it prior to that. I got a negative 40-degree bag. I had puffy pants, different layers, different Gore-Tex layers, full zip stuff, new pair of goggles, just the whole gamut that I needed to work through, a brand new 100-liter pack that I need to figure out where I want to keep things, expedition style so I can get to them quickly. Cold wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. It was pretty warm. To be honest, it was in the 30s during the day and I guess 20s at night, which this gear that I brought was plenty for that. And then I really just practiced on sled pulls, every day. And I looked at gaining 1,000 feet of elevation per hour, pulling a sled like that, either with crampons or snowshoes up certain slopes. Some of them didn't exceed, 30 degrees, but I did go out, find some slopes that I could go on. I practiced self-arresting with an ice axe again, just went over all the skills, the technical skills that are required. I learned that I climb faster in snowshoes sometimes than I do in crampons because of the lifter bar that my snowshoes had. It's going up a very steep slope, but not very difficult exertion-wise when it comes to physical, if that makes sense.
I know this is going to be a tough question because each mountain has its own character, but when it comes to Shasta, Hood, Adams, Whitney, and Rainier, which one tested you the hardest and what made it so challenging?
Whitney was challenging. I went on the Mountaineers route. The ledges were clear of snow, so I got up to Upper Boy Scout Lake the first day, and I was carrying a heavy pack. I actually stashed my hiking shoes, my Hoka Anacapas that I was wearing, and then switched over to my La Sportiva G5s right around Lower Boy Scout Lake, and then went up in mountaineering boots the rest of the way. I got up to Upper Boy Scout Lake, and the winds were they were pretty bad. They were really severe, and I knew that they were going to be like that looking at the wind modeling. And then I started out the next morning. My tent, was just rustling all night long. Started out the next morning around 4-ish a.m. up to the chute. And I called it. I was like, it's not a good situation. The wind is really bad. It's not worth it. If I get hurt out here, it's going to jeopardize my Denali attempt. So went back down, took a nap, packed everything up, went out. That one, it was a very low point for me mentally because I think I took for granted how difficult some summits are and thought that I would just maybe breeze through it. And I definitely didn't breeze through that. And then on the back of my mind, it's like, okay, well, you're getting elevation gain in, you're still carrying a heavy pack. You're just trying to keep that positivity going. But yeah, it was pretty low on that one. Hood was challenging in the respect it's steep. It is super steep. Once we got up to Devil's Kitchen and then started up an unnamed 2 o'clock chute, which had pitches of 40 to 45 degrees in it, just chocked full of ice on the sides. So people that went ahead of us, they were kicking ice down on us when we were in the chute, and we had to rig a dead man fall with pickets, and it was more technical than I expected that it would be. But made the summit of that one, made the summit of Shastina. I didn't get to Shasta because I really just concentrated more on sled pulls while I was out there than summiting that one. And then made the final summit of Rainier was my last training climb before I flew up to Denali. Rainier was fun. It was awesome. We stayed at Camp Muir. We did the DC route. By that point, all my systems had been dialed in, gloves, layers, where everything is in my pack. I just felt prepared, and it was really a breeze. It took us 31 hours car to car, with even sleeping like 8-9 hours, because the rangers came by. They said the weather's great. You don't have to leave, Alpine Start. So we opted to leave at about 3 a.m. And then we ended up passing most of the groups anyway. I was in tip-top shape at that point for Denali, having sled pulled and did a through hike. And yeah, it was fun. It was nice. And it was a relief, I think, mentally to know that I made that summit as well, just for a confidence booster, This one, I will say, was the weirdest attempt. I was in a very weird mental headspace the entire time with this attempt. I had heard so many horror stories. It makes its own weather. You may never get a chance to summit. It is the hardest of the 7 summits. People that have already done Everest, it's a blue-collar mountain. No one's going to help you. No one's going to carry your stuff. There are no porters. Just all the fear-mongering horror stories that you hear about it. I think that really put me in a very weird mental headspace, and I questioned if I even had it in me to make it to the summit. So this one was really the journey, the journey and the process of going through all that and discovering where my limits are, what helps my mental resilience. And you would think that I'd have those skills, I haven't been in the military for like 24 years, but it's a different animal because it's new, it was new to me. I wasn't that experienced on glaciated terrain, rope travel, fixed lines, pulling a sled. It's all different technical skill sets that I didn't have the expertise on.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you were in tip-top shape, and I only knew because you reached out. I think we're getting ready to summit Adams, and you knew that it was, my backyard. Mount Adams is our mountain here in Central Washington. You can see it from all over the place. But I was just impressed because I think you did, and I don't know the correct timeline, Steven, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you did Adams, Mount Hood, and then Rainier within a week. Is that right?
Yeah, it was within a week. Yeah. And that was like driving from mountain to mountain too. So there was some driving. It was, looking back at the timeline, it was aggressive for sure. But I was determined, to do it. Adams was one of my favorite ones. That is such an awesome peak. Yeah, it really is. It was me and an Army buddy that I knew that lived in Seattle, and we were going to do it together. And then he ended up kind of twisting his knee while we were going up to, what is that campground up at the top?
Is it the lunch counter?
The lunch counter. That's what it is. The lunch counter. They all blend together after a point, The lunch, we camped just below the lunch counter. Same expedition style, dug everything out. The wind was pretty bad that night too. And then I headed up by myself around 3 a.m. and then got up to almost the summit before sunrise, which is awesome. And just seeing that glaciated blue ice, on the side of the peak while you're climbing up, it was pretty neat. It was really cool. That was one of my favorite ones while I was out there, for sure. It's such a nice mountain.
And I got to ask, because one thing that I've been doing in my research, because I'm trying to summit Adams in 2026, is a lot of people love the glissading down from the summit. Did you get a chance to glissade down at all?
I did not. The winds were high that day too. I didn't want to take off my crampons because you really shouldn't glissade in crampons. You can really tear something doing that. That last pitch is pretty steep. I didn't really feel comfortable enough glissading on glacial ice down that last pitch. So I kind of walked down nice and gingerly and made it back to camp. I would have liked to do it like around the lunch counter. That did look fun. At that point, I was just in full-on mode to get back and get McDonald's.
Oh, man. And, can you take us through that space and time where you were able to successfully summit Rainier and you knew Denali was next on the list? How was it with having the bag staged, the plane loading? What was going through your mind before stepping onto Denali?
Yeah, so I arrived a day early, which I always do for every expedition. I hung out in Talkeetna, I went around to the food trucks. I got some stuff that I knew I would have to get up there, just extra little nits and pieces, whatnot. Resorted all my bags, And then the next day was meet the team and do the gear layout, which that's when you get your sled, you get your bag, you start packing, and they have all these snacks that you can choose from. So you pack this huge compression bag full of snacks. You split up your tent with your tent mate. You figure out who your tent mate's going to be. And just kind of like looking around the room, I felt fairly confident, right, in the skills that I had and the experiences and climbs that I had done. The majority of people had done Kiambe, Chimborazo, Aconcagua, Kili. Some had already done Vinson and Cartson's Pyramid. No one had done Everest. Denali was still 6, I think, of 7 for one guy that was there, but the majority of everyone had already done Aconcagua and Kili. So you pack up all your bags. That night I had to drill into my sled to get my sled poles kit attached to it, which did make a huge difference versus being on the rope that I saw some people on. So the next day we had a very narrow weather window, and our lead guide, Dawn, told us, hey, it's either we're going to fly out tomorrow in a hurry or we're not going to fly out for another week because the storm system's going to come through and no one's going to be able to get into the glacier. And sure enough, he texted us at 6:50 in the morning. He said, put all your gear on, make sure you're wearing your boots. We are going to the airport and we are going to fly out in 20 minutes. And we got to the airport, we loaded all the bags, we got into the plane, we're flying out. I could see the mountain from the plane. It's massive. It's just huge in the skyline. And then below it, around 15,000 feet, it was just cloud cover. It was all cloud cover below. So I knew that we were going to fly into, snow globe, ping pong ball type kind of weather. And sure enough, we landed and that plane was gone. Once our bags were off, that plane was out of there and a storm system rolled in. And I didn't see my shadow for 7 days. For the first 7 days, it was nothing but snow. It was nothing but cold. Some days were windier than others. Never saw the sun. It's cliche to say, but that mountain truly makes its own weather. It really does. So then you get to base camp, you're rigging your sled. They start passing out all the group gear because you have to carry group gear too, in addition to your own gear. And I was of the thinking that I would keep my sled heavier than my pack, just because that's kind of the way I trained. I had the majority of my gear on my sled versus my pack. And I went with that methodology as well, and it worked pretty well for me. So you descend 500 feet from base camp down a terrain feature known as Heartbreak Hill, because you have to go back up that thing when you're climbing out of there. And it is definitely a heartbreak when you see it, because your sled is even heavier, right? Because you're carrying all your cache stuff, all the human waste that you have, all the trash, just all that stuff's got to go with you. So we descend down Heartbreak Hill. We make it to the first camp, Camp 1. Sometimes the guides will stop you at half camp, which is about halfway between base camp and Camp 1 if you're starting to get blisters. But our guides were good. Everyone was solid, and we made it to Camp 1. I remember setting up the tent, getting in there, getting all, my stuff situated. Alec, my tent mate, came in. We were just kind of sitting down in our bags, getting warm again, trying to stay dry and dry things out, because you don't want to get super wet like the very first day, because it's just a recipe for disaster for the rest of the trip. And he said, "What did you think about today?" I said, "Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic," is what I told him, because I felt good, like physically, but I knew that this is just the first day, and it was probably the easiest day that we would have while we were there. Every day it was a check-in with him and me. How'd you feel today? What'd you think? And every day it was cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic. Trying to not worry about tomorrow problems, just trying to worry about today problems, stay hydrated, eat enough food, do the right things on the break. The one thing about alpine ascents I will say is that they will cut you if you're not making the time hacks and the elevation gain. And our guides told us before we even stepped on the glacier, 1,000 to 1,250 an hour. That's what you need to be able to climb. With a heavy pack, with a heavy sled, you got to be able to maintain that pace. If you can't do that, you're not going to make it to the summit, because summit day is obviously, when you're going higher, it's slower. It goes down to like 750 or even sometimes 500 depending on the conditions. Keeping that in mind, right? And I kind of cheated and looked at my watch and made sure that we were in that realm each day, which we were. And that really kind of set the pace and tone for the expedition, was that first day of just that easy kind of breeze into Camp 1, set everything up. It snowed the whole day. It snowed that night. We woke up to about 3 feet of snow that we had to dig our tents out of. And the very next day, we went up to about 13,000 or 9,000 feet and made a cache, because you basically climb the mountain twice, really. You'll go up from a camp, you'll dig a cache, you'll put in gear, you'll go back down. You'll break camp, go all the way up to another camp, like say from Camp 1 to Camp 2, go back down to the cache cache the next day or pick it up as you're going up to the next camp and then go back to camp 2. And then you repeat that process the whole time until you get to 14 camp, and then you stow the sleds. And then once you get to high camp, like that's it. There's no more sleds. You got to go up the fixed lines, and you're carrying a really, really heavy pack to get up there. So,
oh my gosh, that's hardcore. Because do you remember what the total elevation gain for that ascent?
Yeah, so we went from 8,000, well, for the whole, from beginning to end. Yeah. That's a really good question, because you'd have to add in the cache climbs that we did. Sometimes we did what's called a drive-by, and you'll go by your cache site, you'll dig it up, you'll put it in your sled or your pack, and then you keep going to the next camp. We did that 2 or 3 times, but you start out at base camp, which is about 7,500 feet, and then the mountain itself is 20,300, around there. So about 13,000 feet of gain over that time period. But the weights are crazy. It was very heavy some days.
That's one thing that I loved about the research on Denali is it's called the blue collar climb for a very specific reason. Like you said, the weight, I think it was 80 plus pounds, no porters, no hand holding. What did blue collar mountaineering feel like in real time as you were doing these climbs up and down?
Rough. Very rough. There's very limited comforts. The one good thing is that you can keep cheese all throughout the trip because it's just not going to melt. It's going to stay cold the entire time. And I ate so much cheese on that trip. I would just squeeze, those Philadelphia cream cheese packets straight into my mouth. That was the one good thing. And you could snack as much as you want to. I felt like I had a little bit more of advantage of trying to stay as light as I could from being a thru hiker and knowing like what I truly needed to live in my base weight versus some other people that came on the expedition that I saw. One individual was cut because they weren't making the time hacks, and they sent him home at Camp 2. And they tried to reason with him a couple different times about lightening his load because he wanted to bring all this supplement protein stuff with him. He said, hey, I've used this on other climbs. This is how I do it. And they basically said, you're probably not going to make it to the top, and then sent him home, which was unfortunate. But I do understand the decision that they made to do that because he was holding up the rest of the group, so there's something to be said about that. Another individual in our expedition broke his back or re-injured his back from an injury that he had horseback riding, I think a couple years ago. And then he had to be medevaced out from Camp 2, which is about 11,000 feet. After that, we took a rest day and kind of relaxed to reset. I think the guides needed a rest day too to reset after that. And then we headed up to 14 camp. Yeah, blue collar mountaineering is just a different style. Because you're expected to prep your own tent site and dig out your tent, and you're going to set everything up yourself. And none of the guides are going to help you. Maybe if you have a question about something, you can ask them, but you are expected to be self-sufficient, especially when it comes to rigging your sled and tying into the rope and tying alpine butterflies and just doing all the mountaineering things, that the expertise that you have to know. You could tell who was prepared and who wasn't prepared because a lot of people would need help with ropes and knots and things of that nature, and it would distract from the guide. So I tried to be the one that's why I studied ropes before I went. I wanted to learn all those knots and know that stuff. A good team member.
Now, Stephen, I imagine with any mountain climb, it's not just physical, but also mental. And you even have mentioned that you were in a different space mentally on this journey. Was there a moment on Denali that maybe felt uncertain, and what kept you pushing upward?
Yeah, definitely the fixed lines day, when we had to go up to high camp for the last time. So you're going to carry all your gear in your pack. The sled stays stowed at 14 camp, but you have to climb up the actual glacier. It's at a pitch of about 50 degrees, I think 1,000 feet of gain like that, and you're on a fixed line with an ascender while you're also roped. So you have to do some certain things with the ascender, how you take it off the rope, you got to put it back on the rope where there's knots or there's braces with lockers or carabiners that tie it into the glacier. You have to skip over that stuff. So you're constantly yelling, turtle stop, turtle go. That was our call sign, was turtle stop and turtle go. When someone yells turtle stop, everyone in that rope team repeats it. And then they all just kind of stop and hold in place. And that person that's at that rope junction will switch around their ascender, re-clip in, and then they'll yell turtle go. And then you'll start climbing again. My pack was so heavy that day. It had to have been over 60 pounds with just my gear. And then when we went to the cache site frostbite that we had done 2 days prior. We picked up that gear and then still had to climb up to the ridge, which is about another 500 feet of gain. That was definitely my hardest day mentally and physically. It was tough. I was very tired, and I even told Alec, my tent mate, I was like, that killed me today, dude. I don't know what was going on, but I'm just so tired. I'm drained. He's like, yeah, I felt really good today. And then mentally, you're like, okay, I'm not going to self-evaluate, against how he's feeling, how I'm feeling. It's different for everyone. But yeah, that day was tough. The first day we did fixed lines was so much fun, though, because you step over the Bergschrund. You can actually see into the glacier. It was huge, this big crack that you have to step over that you're climbing up with your crampons and the ascender. You stow your ice axe. You just feel like a badass doing it, honestly, going up that thing. And then the next day, you could see when we were at high camp, you can see the glacier and these little dots that are either going up the fixed lines or down the fixed lines because it's the same path that you take. Just one line is for up, one line is for down. I'll definitely share that picture. It was so cool just to see that slate. And then you get up to that ridge. That ridge was just amazing. I mean, the views we had up there, the weather did finally start to turn after 7 days. We got some good weather. One day was extremely windy and cold. It had to have been -10, I think, with the wind chill during the day. And at night, it was down to the -20s because we walked into the cook tent and it was cold. Like I had never experienced cold like that in my life before. I had on almost every article that I could, along with my summit jacket, puffy pants, thick gloves, just sitting there waiting to get a bagel with some bacon.
And I knew I had to ask you about this because on your last episode, you shared and you introduced me into knowing about frostnip. And I'm wondering, with the cold that Denali presented, did you get any tingling feelings or any activation from the frostnip throughout the climb?
It went pretty well. I didn't have any issues with my fingers. I went to a new glove system for that, a different type of down glove mitten style that one of the guides recommended me because I reached out to him and told him my story. And I said, hey, I've had frostnip before. I'm a little concerned about it. And he gave me a glove system to try, and it worked out perfectly. It was great and loved it. Yeah, thank God. But my nose did get some very severe frostbite, or not frostbite, but sunburn, because the sun is constantly glaring. I mean, when it's sunny out, it feels like 90 degrees. There was a point at 14 camp that we were hanging out in t-shirts and like our base layer bottoms, that's it. And we did a little charcuterie board. We were drying stuff out. We were messing around with gear, and it felt like 80 degrees outside because it just radiates so heavily off the snowpack. And then you're up that high too. It feels much hotter than what it is. Ambient temperature was around 30 degrees, but yeah, the feel could have been easily 60s, 70s, sometimes 80s. So the sun, I tried to put on as much sunscreen on my nose as I could. I didn't have the right mask set up or the right baklava that I really needed. Everyone had these cool outer U face masks that I now have because I saw it on Denali, but it comes with this little tip that covers the entirety of your nose. Nothing would get sunburned, and mine got the brunt of it because I would get lazy with applying sunscreen on breaks, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to dig it out now. I'm just going to keep going. It definitely took the majority of it when I got back to Talkeetna and looking in the mirror.
I got to ask because, you're based out of Colorado. You have the Rockies there to train throughout the year. What separates, say, a regular mountain hike from your mountaineering expeditions?
Yeah, definitely the length of time that you're on the mountain and how you're going to climb it in stages. A lot of the hikes I think that we do as climbers or, interested in 14ers or other mountains, you can do in a day. You can definitely accomplish them if you wanted to in one day. Now, with Denali, there's no way you can climb that in a day. It's the length of time, and then it's also the style of expedition that you're out there. It's very austere. You have very little creature comforts. Even on an overnighter that you're going to do a 14er or a peak out in the Pacific Northwest or in the Appalachians, right? You can carry a bunch of stuff. You can carry a bunch of creature comfort gear that you want. Maybe a camp chair, maybe an extra meal or things of that nature. You're not going to carry that on Denali. You're going to carry what you need on an expedition, and that's it. But I will say with Aconcagua, that's an expedition style too, and you climb it in stages. And that was much more creature comfort than what I had on Denali because you knew that the mules were going to carry everything for you from, say, the start of the park to the Confluencia to Plaza de Mulas. And then from that point, you're carrying all your own gear. And you don't need as much as you would for Denali. You wouldn't need a harness or an ice axe or crampons, some of that other gear that you had to carry. So yeah, definitely the length of time, the creature comforts, and then the weight that you're going to carry. That's what I would say separates is the difference between them.
Now, Stephen, if you can take us through that summit day on Denali, what lessons did that climb teach you that stick with you the most? Or what transformation did you see in yourself once you summited Denali?
Yeah, so we got to high camp. And then the very next day, there was a lenticular cloud over the summit route because you go up through a terrain feature called Denali Pass. Then you go through the football field, which is this basic flat terrain feature that's as big as a football field, up son of a bitch hill, and then finally up to the summit ridge. So the first day that we were at high camp, there was a lenticular cloud because winds were really bad. So we didn't even get a summit push on that day. We went to bed that night and the guides came out and said, hey, we are going to make a push tomorrow. So we're going to get suited up around 10 a.m., which is really cool on Denali is you don't start before it gets warm, before the sun is out. So there's no alpine starts. I never carried a headlamp. It was as bright as it was around 11 o'clock at night than it was as 4 o'clock in the morning. The sun really never set the whole time that we were out there. So we were able to start at 10. We started up, and then it's the same process going up Denali Pass. It's called the Autobahn because two Germans that were on it one year, they actually fell to their death. And people nicknamed it the Autobahn because they were trying to go fast unroped, doing some dangerous things. But it's roped in with pickets, so you have to clip in, get to the picket, turtle stop, turtle go, switch over to the next picket, and then keep going up. Once we got up to Denali Pass, it was super cold. Very windy, very bitter cold. Immediately had to put on more layers, stop to take a break as quick as possible, and then just keep moving because you don't want to stay cold like that too long. Got up to the polo field, and then finally started up the last hill. That last hill was brutal. It was tough. The snow was kind of thin on the glacier. It was soft. It was squishy. It was hard to get kick steps in, so it was physically exhausting. And by that point, it was probably 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we had a turnaround time of 5 p.m. If we didn't make the summit by 5, we were going to turn around. So everyone was watching their watches, anticipation, trying to get up there quick enough. Finally got up to the ridge. That ridge is just amazing. There are so many cornices, huge ones too, that I didn't even notice till looking back at pictures because I was so tired at that point. But it was amazing to be up there at, 20,000 feet in Alaska, the top of North America, and just looking out. You could almost see the ocean from the peak, which is really cool. It wasn't as cold as I thought it would be on the summit. I mean, it was cold. It was probably in the teens, negative or 0, but it wasn't crazy cold like I thought it would be. And then I remember crying, kind of not uncontrollably, but definitely weeping and sobbing. I mean, it was too early to reflect on it, but when I got back down later on, as I said earlier, it was the journey. It wasn't the summit that really changed me. It was the journey for this one and encompassing everything all together, going out to the Pacific Northwest and trying out different gear, living on Shasta for a week, doing Hood, Adams, Rainier, Whitney, then going up to Denali, and then scenes, having people get cut. And then, 2 individuals died in an avalanche while we were down at 14 camp. That one of them actually helped pull my tent mate out of a crevasse that he punched through while we were going around Windy Corner. And he found out about it later on. And, just the whole journey of that expedition and that climb and going through everything, that's what I really think changed me. And it changed me how I look at summits too. I used to be, it's all about getting to the top. It's all about the summit. It's more about the journey than it is, getting the peak or getting to the top of a summit. Because to me, I think the journey is what really changed. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it does.
Oh, no, for sure. And I think that's something that, day hikers and backpackers can understand, that it's sometimes not about the destination, but it's about the journey to that destination. And I'm glad you were able to, share your pictures and tag me on your pictures from all your summits on this quest. I know that, it's been a long journey, and this quest to summit the 7 summits is still on your radar. But for folks that are dreaming about not just summiting Denali, but also maybe summiting the 7 summits, but are unsure if they're capable, what should they know before committing? And can you share anything on just, training, mindset, and non-negotiables?
Yeah, definitely for training, 1,000 feet of elevation gain an hour. Like I will stick by that's a mountaineering standard, unless you're a North Face athlete and you're gaining like 2,000 feet an hour, which those are very few and far between. But if you can, 750 to 1,000 with a decent pack, you'll be fine. You will be fine. For training wise, the Stairmaster works great if you can't get hills where you're at and elevation gain. 2 to 3 hours, maybe 2 or 3 times a week with a heavy pack. People are going to look at you very strange in the gym, but who cares? You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you to be in shape. Just the mental headspace of every journey starts with a single step. It may seem like it's daunting and very challenging, and it will be, mentally and physically, sometimes emotionally, but you can't do it unless you start. You got to take that first step. And that first step can be as simple as just going on a walk, for 3 miles, or maybe trying a different peak or trying a harder peak, or just going to the gym. That's all that it takes is just one step. For non-negotiables, you definitely need to have layering systems down. Like your gear has got to be dialed in. On the mountain, particularly Denali, is not the time to be trying out gear and different things to see if they work. You want to have all that dialed in before you get there because it's not going to show you any mercy by any means. Evident by the fact that, it snowed for 7 days and I didn't see my shadow. So you got to make sure your gear is good to go. Other than that, give it a go, give it a try. Who knows? You may love it. You might not be for you. I found that I'm much more comfortable on snow and ice than I am on bare rock. For sure. Snow and ice, I feel very fast. I feel light, except that day that I was going up to high camp. But every other time, I felt really good. On rock, I'm kind of iffy, It's just, I feel like a fish out of water.
I think during our last recording, you're getting ready to make your push to summit Mount Kilimanjaro. And shortly after your episode came out, I believe you were able to successfully summit it. We like to do that regular segment on the podcast where we do a deep dive into our guest Instagram feed and ask them about a post or a moment that really stood out for us. And I knew I had to ask you about your Kilimanjaro post because there's a specific picture that you posted of headlamps snaking up the mountain during a midnight summit push. Can you take us back to that moment? And what did that climb feel like both physically and mentally?
We were leaving Camp Barafu and we were going up to the summit, and it was just me and my guide Glitzen, and he was such a good guide. He spoke really well English. We talked about different climbs, different peaks. He pointed out different climbs to me like Mwenzi Peak and Shira Needle, which I still want to go back and do to this day. Just a great individual. So we stepped off at midnight. I wanted to really test my body on this one and see what it was capable of. So I had the goal of trying to get to the summit for sunrise. A lot of people typically don't get there, even though they start at midnight, till about 8 or 9 a.m., somewhere around there. They'll see sunrise as they're going up to Stella Point, which is, a terrain feature that's about 800 feet from the actual summit. So I pushed it, went as slow and mountaineering as I can, but as hard as I could. And we got up there to Stella Point, and it was still really dark. It was about 5 in the morning, so it took us maybe 5 hours from Barafu to Stella Point. And I looked back, and then that's when I took that video of all those headlamps coming up the mountain, because we passed a lot of those people on the way up, respectfully. Once they took a break, we would just kind of skirt by and then keep going. We were the very first ones on the top of the summit. I don't know if Glitzen was happy about that or he was more upset about it because he was like, you didn't take any breaks. And I said, no, I felt good. I'm acclimatized. Let's go. Let's do it. So we took an extended break on the summit for about an hour, got out my heavy puffy, put on another layer. I was hoping to get a really awesome sunrise up there with him, just us two. But by the time the sun came up, it was all socked in with clouds. It started to snow. So we made the decision to just go ahead and descend instead of waiting. But we did see quite a few of the people as they were coming up. And, it's kind of neat being the first ones coming down because everybody's like, did you summit? How was it? What's it like up there? And, you could pump them up too, which I was trying to do. I was like, yeah, you're almost there. You got like maybe an hour to go. You're there. You got it. You can do this. And everyone, yeah, the guides enjoyed it and Glitzen was having a good time. And then the cool part about the descent is Glitzen took me over into this really deep scree field where I don't think very many people descend. And it was plunging scree where you just kind of step and you go down 2 or 3 feet at a time as you're plunging down through that. It was really fun. And we made up a lot of time going down that way. But I don't think it's the standard route because me and him were the only 2 people over there. So I don't know if it was the secret route or if he just felt good enough to take me over there. I'm not sure. But yeah, Kili was so much fun, very enjoyable. I recommend it to anyone that wants to get into a high altitude peak. Looking back at it, I wish I would have saved it as my last for the 7. Hopefully I'll make all 7, just because it was such an enjoyable peak. No summit is ever easy, but Kili was very enjoyable. From the people to the views, Tanzania, just the whole expedition, the food, everything was just great. It was awesome.
Man, that's great to hear. It's definitely a bucket list. I see more and more previous guests. That's one of their first summits that they're doing, and it just looks like an incredible experience. You don't have to necessarily be super dialed in as far as like your mountaineering goes. I think it's still definitely friendly for those that are getting into mountaineering.
Absolutely. You need hardly any technical skills. The most technical portion was the Barranco wall, which I would equate that to maybe like a class 3 14er or something along those lines, but nothing to the level of fixed lines or harnesses or gear. As long as you have your layers dialed in, you're good to go. I saw people doing it in trail runners going up to the summit, which surprised me because it was a little, I wore my double boots, but I wasn't going to wear trail runners up there. That's a little cold to me, but they did it. Yeah, they did it. So it's a good walk-up peak, no matter which route that you take, whether it's Marangu, Lamoshu, Mashami, they all kind of converge at one point. So yeah, definitely recommend Kilimanjaro. It's such a fun peak. It really is.
Well, it's been awesome speaking with you, Stephen, about your experiences. And this last section of questions are regular questions we like to ask all our guests. And I'm wondering if there's been any changes in the last year, because you have changed up your gear. And I'm wondering, when it came to the journey to Denali, was there a regular summit routine, or maybe it was the end of the hike routine that you did? For a lot of us, it's packing that favorite snack or drink. For others, it's a moment of Zen. And for a lot of us, it's that favorite meal afterwards. Was there a regular customer routine that you like to do when you were checking off the Pacific Northwest and West Coast peaks?
McDonald's, still the go-to. Couple Big Macs, large fry, milkshake. Yeah, definitely. But I definitely changed up my nutrition on the mountain to more goos and gels, I think, while I was out in the Pacific Northwest, because I knew that was when freeze is bad and you can kind of switch them around on your person to keep them warm. So I moved away from like bars, things of that nature.
And then this next one is, I'm wondering, was there a new luxury item that you packed on any of these trips?
Still the beard brush. I definitely had my beard brush with me. I did start packing lens wipes and anti-fog wipes for goggles, which helped out a lot, particularly on those really windy days when you had to wear them. But as far as comfort item, I would say the new thing that I've added is the Outer U face mask, which really, I saw everyone on Denali had it, and I fell in love with it. I'm upset that I never heard about it or knew about it before I got over there. But it wasn't on the gear list or the packing list. But I have added that to my kit for sure.
And we're recording this at the tail end of 2025. Are there any hiking or travel goals for 2026 that you can share with us, or anything exciting on the horizon that we should look out for?
Yeah, so I'm going to start the quest of doing all the Colorado 14ers in the winter now and become what's called a frozen finisher, so doing them all during the winter months. I'm looking at a possible solo ascent of Gannett Peak in Wyoming this winter, which will be pretty cool, I think. Planning on Mount Blanc and Cartson's Pyramid next year as well, probably around June or fall timeframe. And then I'm looking at Elbrus, but there's a lot of moving parts to going to Russia, and I need to figure out how I'm going to fit that one in. So yeah, that's kind of what's on the horizon. No, nothing big, just normal stuff.
And this last section, Stephen, is the new this or that questions for season 13. You're going to be the first one to preview them. And some of them stayed, but there's some new ones that I'm interested in seeing what your response is. Again, you're more than welcome to say both or neither. But the first one is, if you had to choose, would you choose ascending or descending?
I think it depends on what type of medium that you're on. If it's snow and ice, I would choose descending, because it's fun to descend on snow and ice. You can glissade, you can make it quick, it's fun. If it's rock, I would choose ascending. I am such a better rock climber than I am a down climber. When I have to down climb, facing in on some class 4 or 5 stuff is truly difficult. It really takes a lot of mental preparation and figuring out where my feet need to go in my hands. So ascending on rock and then descending on ice.
And then I think I know the answer to this one, but waterfalls or summits?
Summits, for sure.
And then in order to reach these summits, you've been able to do different routes, but if you had to choose between these two types of routes, would you choose one with switchbacks or would you rather just go straight up?
And that's such a good question. I was looking at that one in your email and I was trying to decide, yeah, man. Switchbacks are cool, but just going straight up and getting it over with, I mean, that's kind of cool too. I think I would choose straight up, like maybe through a gully or a chute, to go up that way to get to the top. As long as the gully had good terrain to it, as it wasn't like a scree, bare, dirt mess type kind of gully. If it's that, I'm not going straight up. I'd rather do switchbacks.
And then our most controversial one, but trek poles are freehand.
Honestly, I have started carrying my trekking poles more than I'm using them. I use them now like in gullies. I still use them on the descent for sure. And I always extend them out too on the descent so that you don't have to reach over with them and you feel like your balance is going to be off. But while I'm ascending, I haven't been using them that much. They've just been an accessory, like a purse, like I'm just carrying in my hand.
And then you actually converted me to the Anacappas last time we spoke. I was able to purchase some and they've kind of become my winter or shoulder season boots. But I got to ask, for you personally, trail runners or hiking boots?
Yeah, I would still go with like the high top kind of trail runner hybrid thing. Not necessarily trail runners. I just feel like more stability with the ankle with those.
And then when it comes to trail systems, do you prefer a loop trail or an out and back trail?
I'm getting more into the loop trails. I kind of like that, where you start one way and then you end the same point, right? But you take just a different route on the way down, so it's not just out and back. Yeah, I'm kind of getting into loops. I like that versus out and back.
And I know you've seen both of these in spectacular fashion, but if you had to choose, would you choose a sunrise hike or a sunset hike?
I think I would still choose a sunrise hike because you get the shadow of the mountain, which is my favorite atmospheric effect. An alpenglow, sometimes in the morning, is just so, it pops differently than it does in the evening. You have to have like the right conditions, I think, for it to really pop in the evening. When it comes up in the morning, like it's pink, it's red, it's orange, it's so many shades of color throughout the atmosphere. It's pretty, sunrise.
And then Colorado is known for having both of these in stunning fashion. But if you had to choose, would you choose spring wildflowers or fall colors?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Wildflowers are pretty crazy on some of the peaks out here, but the fall colors, like when those aspens turn, it's pretty amazing. And it's chilly. I think I'd choose fall colors.
And then these next two are new for this upcoming season. When it comes to your watering carrying system, are you using a water bottle or a water bladder?
Yeah, I'm a bottle guy. I'm not a bladder guy. I know some people that it just works for them, because they can take it and use it. I really don't drink unless I'm stopping anyway. So having the bottle just makes more sense to me, I think, for that regard. And then once you start getting into colder stuff, the bladder's not going to work. It's going to freeze anyway.
And then the last one, Stephen, is in order to celebrate your summits, are you more of a summit beer or even just a drink or a summit snack type of person?
I'm a summit snack when
or
I'm...
both.
Yeah, I'm both. I'm a summit snack when I'm on the summit, and I'm a summit drink when I get down. I don't trust myself drinking alcohol on the top of a summit. Because you still got to get down,
Yeah. Well, that was it, Stephen, for the this or that questions. If folks want to follow your upcoming 2026 journey, as well as check out all your previous posts from not just Denali, but Kilimanjaro and all the other peaks that you've been able to do, where are some of the places they can find you on social media or online?
Yeah, they can find me on Insta. I'm Paul_Bunyan, BUNYEN. _214. I don't know why there's 214 of those out there, but there's 214 of them. And then on Facebook, I'm just Stephen, STEPHEN, Palazzo, PALAZZO. I have a LinkedIn, but I don't really check it that much, so I wouldn't try and DM me there.
We'll be sure to put the Instagram and Facebook in the episode show notes so people can follow along. Stephen, it has been great speaking with you again and hearing about your experience, not just on Denali, but the journey there along the West Coast. It was truly remarkable remarkable to follow along on social media this year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what 2026 and beyond has to offer for you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and thanks for all the work that you do out there in the community of interest out in the space. Everyone that comes on your podcast is definitely, adventurer, mountaineer, extraordinaire. You've had some really good people, and you just have a knack for interviewing. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. Thanks, man.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Stephen. We extend a heartfelt thanks to him for joining us on the podcast. Be sure to follow him on Instagram at Paul_Bunyan_214. And for more, be sure to check out the episode show notes. This episode of Hikes and Mics was produced by Jordan Smith. Be sure to follow her adventures on Instagram at jordan.journeys. New episodes will drop every Monday throughout the winter hiking season, with the occasional Friday bonus episodes along the way. To make sure you never miss out a moment of these inspiring trail stories, hit that follow or subscribe button. Your support truly keeps the community going through every season. Don't forget to connect with us on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. That's where you'll find behind-the-scenes episode visuals, my own winter hiking adventures, and plenty more to keep the cold weather stoke alive. As we wrap up today's journey, remember, even when the trails are quiet and the mountains are blanketed in snow, the spirit of adventure is still very much alive. So tread those happy trails, stay warm out there, and keep exploring. Until next time, my fellow hikers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow along with him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursaminooroutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order.